This is a depiction of the war in heaven. Or the victory of the Archangel Michael over the dragon. This dates back to the first half of the 12th century and can be seen in the Civet Church of San Pedro el Monte. It's from Romanesque paintings, edited by Claude Schaffner, and it was published in 1965 and 1968. See page 81.
Lloyd K. Packer, who's a member of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, Saturday morning, October 1st, 1983 conference.
The doctrine is so logical and so reasonable and explains so many things that it is a wonder that the Christian world rejected it. It's so essential a part of the equation of life that left out, life just cannot add up. It remains a mystery. The doctrine is simply this. Life did not begin with mortal birth. We lived in spirit form before we entered mortality. We are spiritually the children of God.
The Council of Nicaea did away with the doctrine of the Godhead. But there was another council in 553 AD, the Fifth Council, or the Second Council of Constantinople, the Fifth Ecumenical Council, in which Origen's views and interpretations were attacked by the Emperor Justinian, who lived about 527 through 565 AD. The Emperor Justinian wrote against Origen's interpretations of the preexistence of souls. Different aspects of the preexistence were dramatized in certain mystery plays, some of which presented the fall of Lucifer, as depicted here in this particular work. Artworks show the skins of the bright angels turning black during their fall from heaven. Thus, in the mystery plays, tanners would play the fall of Lucifer because of how they tanned animal skins to darker colors.
This doctrine of premortal life was known to ancient Christians. For nearly 500 years the doctrine was taught, but it was then rejected as a heresy by a clergy that had slipped into the dark ages of apostasy. Once they rejected this doctrine, the doctrine of premortal life, and the doctrine of redemption for the dead, they could never unravel the mystery of life. They became like a man trying to assemble a strand of pearls on a string that's too short. There is no way they can put them all together. Why is it so strange a thought that we lived as spirits before entering mortality? Christian doctrine proclaims the resurrection, meaning that we will live after mortal death. If we live beyond death, why should it be strange that we live before birth? The Scriptures teach this doctrine, the doctrine of premortal life. But for his own reasons, the Lord provides answers to some questions with pieces placed here and there throughout the Scriptures. We're to find them, we're to earn them. In that way, sacred things are hidden from the insincere. Of the many verses revealing this doctrine, I will quote two short phrases from the testimony of John in the 93rd section of the Doctrine and Covenants. The first, speaking of Christ, says plainly, "He was in the beginning, before the world was." And the other, referring to us, says with equal clarity, "Ye also were in the beginning with the Father." Essential facts about our premortal life have been revealed, and although they are sketchy, they unravel the mystery of life.
And there was a war in heaven, and Michael fought against the dragon. Revelation chapter 12. Many aspects and elements of the preexistence can be seen in ancient to later Jewish, Chinese, Greek, and other nations' legends, traditions, writings, artworks, and scriptures, especially in early to later Christianity. And what you can find there is the council in heaven, the war in heaven, and the fall of the apostate angels that sinned against God and the other angels. And all these things are common themes in many nations throughout the world. In the Native American traditions and customs, there are legends about Christ's visit to the Americas, and also traces of the pre-existent story are visible there too. Though these areas would be interesting to cover, here we were just going to focus on early to later Christianity. Dragon being slain by Michael the Archangel. This is a 14th through the 15th century depiction, dated by some as being from the 411 through 416. It shows the council of angels meeting in heaven before the throne of God. A number of chairs became vacant after some of the angels had fallen out of heaven. Some angels were shown doing the following: jumping out of their chairs, falling towards the earth, crashing into the earth, crashing down further as if they had fallen down into the underworld. This can be found in The History of Hell by Alice K. Turner, and is published by Harcourt, Brace and Company, New York, San Diego, London, in 1993. Pages about 95, figure number 3. Showing again the council in heaven, and Satan's fall from heaven, crashing down into the earth with the fallen angels. Another depiction of the battle in heaven again. This comes from early Gothic manuscripts, number 2, and dates back to between 1250 to 1285. This book is by Nigel Morgan, published by Harvey Miller, London, in 1988. Figure 37. The seven-headed dragon attacks a woman's child, and the child is taken up into heaven by the hands of God, who extend down to clasp the hands of the child, to take the child into heaven. See Revelation chapter 12, Jude 6, 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 4. In this particular case, it is a drawing that I did of this ancient work. For the original, see the source that I mentioned. This is my own drawing and a recreation of that particular artwork. Here's an original. Again depicted. This comes from the history of world painting. This comes again from the history of world painting, page 103, showing the War of the Angels from the Apocalypse of Beatrice. Again, that's Beatrice Saint Sever, Gascony, between 1028 and 1072. Manuscript illumination showing the war between the angels and the dragon. This is a depiction of Satan's fall from heaven. He's being thrust out of heaven. This is found in the medieval miniatures, and it's found in the book entitled Medieval Miniatures from the Department of Manuscripts, formerly the Library of Burgundy, the Royal Library of Belgium. Commentaries by L.M.J. de Lacy, published by Harry N. Abrams, New York. See pages 96 through 97. This is a portion of a 6-part depiction showing the creation and the fall of the angels. This dates back to about 1410 AD. Here's an original. The first one was a drawing that I did from this depiction. Here's some other artworks to show the war in heaven. Notice that Satan is darkened in his fall. He loses his former state of glory, according to a lot of sources. Some more depictions of the war in heaven. Some are from the book Monuments of Romanesque Art. Hans Sarswensky. See figure 103 of the source title page that you've seen right before this picture. Notice that this is a depiction of Adam and Eve being sent down to the earth. They're passing through symbols which are called mandorlas, which are often seen with depictions of people going in and out of different realms of existence. You see this symbol, it's kind of like the shape of a tunnel. It's a symbol of rebirth and also passing from one realm of existence into another. For example, you see the symbol in the Christ ascension up into heaven, Christ descending down into limbo, Hades, purgatory. So in this case, Christ is sending down Adam and Eve. He's already there on the earth, as it is symbolized in the Lamb there. And the Father is up in heaven, also a part of sending down Adam and Eve in this particular depiction. Figure 1323, dated back to 1155. Again showing the angel Michael slaying the dragon, hitting again to the war in heaven. Again, the title page that you've seen earlier is where this source is the source for this particular work. See page 465. This is from the altarpiece in Renaissance Venice by Peter Humphrey, published by Yale University Press, New Haven and London, published in 1993, and it shows a depiction of behind the person there is Michael slaying the dragon, and this one dates back to 1480 AD. This comes from A History of Spanish Painting by Chandler Rathbone Post, Harvard University, Volume 6, Part 1, The Valesian School in the Late Middle Ages and Early Renaissance. This is published by Cambridge, Massachusetts, Harvard University Press, 1935. Cross Reprint Company, New York, 1970. This can be found on page 113, figure 40. Workshop of Jacob Mart and Rex Act, St. Michael, and also Catherine on the other portion. But the main interest here is the war in heaven, again to be depicted with the depiction of St. Michael. Same volume. After, see figure 48, and this is part of chapter LX VIII, or in other words, Roman numerals again. The War in Heaven. Same volume, page 141, figure 54. Michael fighting with the devil. This is in the same work, volume 6, part 2, page 351, figure 143. Michael again slaying the dragon. Same volume, page 611, figure 270. This is in volume 11. It was published in 1953. Figure 55. Same volume. Figure 131. Michael battling with the dragon again, symbolic of the devil. This is in the same work, again, A History of Spanish Painting, Volume 12, Part 1. This volume was published in 1955, or 1958. See figure 139. Same volume, page 758. Figure 345. This comes from A History of Spanish Painting, Volume 2, page 541. Figure 212. This is from 50 Centuries of Art by Francis Henry Taylor, published for the Metropolitan Museum of Art by Harper and Brothers, New York. See page 116. This is a 15th century work showing again the battle of the angels. Michael thrust the Satan and his angels down into the jaws of hell. There's that same work that's by Joseph Campbell, The Power of Myth, with Bill Moyers, Betty Sue Flowers editor, published by Doubleday, New York, London, Toronto, Sydney, Auckland, 1988. And it was it can be found on plate 14. Fall of the Rebellious Angels from Les Tres Riches Heures de Duc de Barry Brothers Limburg Franco-Flemish 1411 through 1416. This comes from A History of Spanish Painting by Chandler Rathfont Post, Volume 2, published in 1930, page 836, figure 352. This comes from Volume 2, again, page 853, figure 361. This is in the same work, Volume 2, page 876, figure 378. This comes from A History of Spanish Painting by the same author, Post, Volume 7, Part 1, published in 1938, page 163, figure 38. This is from the same volume, A History of Spanish Paintings, again by Post, Volume 7, Part 1. This is on page 247, see figure 72. Figure 85 of the same volume. This again comes from Postworks, as cited earlier, mentioned earlier. Volume 7, Part 2, page 573, figure 213. This was published in 1938. This is from the same volume, again of Postworks, page 576, figure 214. Page 599, figure 229. Page 601, figure 231. Figure 376. Volume 3, page 99, figure 287, published in 1930. Volume 8, Part 1, page 87, figure 31, published in 1941. Page 55, figure 152. Volume 8, Part 2, figure 195. Page 601, figure 282. Volume 5, page 47, published in 1934. Figure 16. Page 137, figure 35. This artwork is based on a portion of a 13th century depiction of the war in heaven, Revelation chapter 12. Alan Richardson made this drawing based on this work in June 1992. For the original, see French Miniatures or Medieval French Miniatures by Jean Porcher and Harry N. Abrams. He was the publisher. Published in New York. Top portion of page XLV, Scene from the Apocalypse. Lambert de Saint Omer, Liber Floridas, circus 1260. The arm of God clasps the wrist of the Christ child and pulls him into the heavenly temple or city. Thus also is the child saved from the dragon, who curls in its tail some of the stars, which represents the spirits of heaven, in order to pull them out of heaven. This artwork is based on a 13th century AD work. This portion, which has been enlarged here, is by Alan Richardson of Utah, 1992. For the original, see Early Gothic Manuscript, number 2. And the time frame for these artworks are from 1250 through 1285 by Nigel Morgan, 1988. See figure 37. And this depicts here the hand of God clasping the hand of the Christ child as the Christ child enters into the heavenly realms. And thus the Christ child is being carried away safe into the hands of an angel, who passes the Christ child into the hands of the Father, away from the dragon. This is based on a portion of a 12th century depiction of the war in heaven. See monuments of Romanesque art, the art of the church treasure in northwestern Europe by Hans Swarzanski, 2nd edition, 1967, 1st edition, 1954. The University of Chicago Press. See plate 128, figure 291. Again, this is a depiction of an angel coming down out of heaven to take hold of the Christ child's right wrist with his right hand. This was an adaptation from 12th English century, dating back to 1140 AD. And this was a drawing that I did back in May 1992. Drell D. Thorpe, based on this earlier work. War in heaven again.
The legendization of the preexistence. The basic elements to the preexistence consist of the following. The spirit was created before the body. It lived in a family in heaven before the creation of the world. The angels of God were these pre-existing spirits. A council was held in heaven in order to discuss the creation of the world, into which the spirit sons of and daughters of God would descend in order to gain mortal bodies. Satan, then a good angel, suggested a plan of force and wanted to take over the Father's position because he would force everyone to be saved.
This comes from page 328 of the source depicted.
Christ, as the firstborn spirit, wanted to maintain freedom of choice on earth, and because the human family would be free, they would sometimes sin. Thus, someone would have to come and atone for the sins of the world in order to give the human family a chance to repent and return to glory.
Shown again still here the battle mentioned in a lot of sources, writings, early Christian writings, the battle between Michael the Archangel and the devil. This is a German work. We're going to go through a chronology of how this doctrine faded off into legends and traditions. Page 329.
The Father said that he would send Christ to be the Redeemer. Because Christ was chosen, Satan rebelled and fought against Christ. Satan caused a war in heaven, and Michael the Archangel and his host of angels thrust Satan and his angels out of heaven. Satan and his angels fell, and thus they became the demons who still war against God. These concepts are found throughout Christian history, scriptures, illumination manuscripts, artworks, icons, monuments, mystery plays, and
Page 333, dating back to the 1500s or approximately the 15th century.
the early Jewish and Christian sects developed their own particular interpretations to these things by including all or some of these aspects.
Page 353.
The following is a chronological timeline that shows how this doctrine faded off in what I call the legendization process of the apostasy. The New Testament writers believed many aspects of the story about the preexistence.
Page 409.
That the human family has a family, consists of a heavenly Father of spirits. Before the creation, some of the angels had sinned. Satan and his angels fought with Michael and his angels. Satan and his angels were thrust out of and fell from heaven. The consequence of sins in pre-existence determined the type of body and condition one could be born into. A family came down from heaven. To return to heaven suggests that one has first been there. Preordinate.
Plate 65, dated back to 1330 AD.
Preordination. The choosing of prophets or different ones to serve certain missions in life, and they were preordained to serve certain missions and callings.
Again, 1330 AD. This is plate number 66. Continuing on with this chronology.
Christ is the firstborn in this pre-existence. Christ was also anointed above all angels, chosen to be the Father's Son in the flesh. Now, this was basic New Testament writers that mention these different things.
This is from Flemish Art from the Beginning till Now, and it's by a number of authors who contributed to this, published and printed by Arch Cape Press, New York, and in 1985, Fons Mercator, Antwerp. This one here is dates back to the 16th century. Flores, Bjöger, 1549 through 1570. The fall of the rebel angel. This comes from Christian Mythology by George Every, published by Hamlin in 1970. This is part of the contents page showing a depiction of Michael, who has bound the devil hand and foot in irons.
About 100 through 118, there's a question mark about this time frame, but Barnabas was an early Christian writer, said basically that Satan is called the Black One because he had fallen from heaven. And the Odes of Solomon and Clement of Rome speak of Christ.
Page 42. This is in Genesis A, that shows the fall of the angels.
About 30 through 107, Ignatius mentions the war in heaven, and that Christ was begotten before time. He mentions Satan as the apostate fallen angel. About 130, Matthias, in writing to Dioletus, speaks of pilgrimages from heaven, and we are sojourners on earth. In other words,
this comes from the Secret Book of Revelation by Gilly Colspell, published by Collins, St. James Place, London, 1979, page 168.
In the Gospel of Philip, about 140 AD, the soul's descent from heaven and souls as other realm pilgrims are mentioned. Papias, who was about 70 through 155, mentions watcher angels, and this shows Jewish apocalyptic traditional influences in the Papias writings. 160, the Shepherd of Hermas speaks of a pre-existing church and that Christ was in council. In other words, Christ was in the heavenly council. Just Martyr, about 110 through 165, mentions demons that counterfeited the truth, and he also talks about fallen angels. 110 through 172, Tatian the Assyrian, he mentions some things about the preexistence, vaguely.
Page 169.
115 through 168 through 181, Theophilus of Antioch mentions the council in heaven, or the heavenly council. 120 through 202, Irenaeus speaks of Christ as the firstborn. He mentions the war in heaven and accepts and rejects other aspects of the pre-existence. It was created at the same time that the body was.
This Irenaeus again.
145 through 220, Tertullian. He rejects and accepts other aspects about the pre-existence story. Spirits had no premortal existence, and then again in other of his writings he mentions that were pilgrims on the earth. But at the same time he also accepts Enoch's writings, as restored through Ezra, as being scripture. And the writings of Enoch mention the fallen angels, or the rebel angels that fell from heaven. So that was an aspect that Tertullian accepts, and also Tertullian hints towards that Christ came to earth to blot out the sins of his evil brother, which the devil was the evil brother that caused mankind to sin. So he hints this idea that Jesus Christ and Satan were spirit brothers.
Page 77.
Jesus Christ, as the good brother, came down from heaven to blot out the memory of the evil brother, the devil. In the recognitions of Clement, which have been dated through the 1st through the 4th centuries AD, with a question mark as to exact time frame for this particular early Christian work.
Page 79. Notice here the child is being carried away, saved away from the dragon, up into another realm of existence where his father is. The hands of the Father come down to clasp the hands of the Son in this rites of passage, hand clasping, usually that takes place in other realm journeys. This is a very common theme that you see in ascensions up into heaven and things of this nature.
Clementine recognitions say that the world has existed through the ages so that the spirits destined to come here might fulfill their number, and here make their choice between the upper and the lower worlds. Origin, who lived about...
Pages 160 through 161, again depicting the War in Heaven drama, Revelation chapter 12, from the Inger Tapestry. the seven-headed dragon. This is on the other page. Notice again here the angels clasping the arms of the Christ child in order to be taken up into heaven away from the dragon.
Lived about 185 through 243, or as others have dated him, 185 through 230 through 254 AD.
Origin
defends the doctrine about the preexistence, that the human family preexisted as spirits before mortal life. Christ is the firstborn of all creation. Christ was with the Father in the beginning, and it was to him that the Father said, "Let us make man in our own image." Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. There was a council in heaven, and Christ was not simply an angel, but he was the angel of the great council.
These artworks do not follow the chronology of the other messages, that's chronology that I'm playing from these other sources. So when you consider and look at the artworks, realize that it doesn't follow any chronological timeline, but the references to the early Christian writers and other artworks in this chronological that you'll be hearing from time to time, they don't go along with the artworks, but they will follow a particular timeline. This particular artwork comes from Italian paintings in the Walters Art Gallery by Federico Zeri, Volume 1. It was published in 1976. Baltimore, publishers by the trustees. And this particular work is Plate 11, Figure 12. This is Figure 36, found in Italian Art by Andrea Castile, translated by Peter and Linda Murray, 1956. It was also published by Thomas Yoshloff in New York in 1963. Again, depicting the battle between Michael the Archangel and the dragon.
Christ was sent from heaven as the angel of God for the salvation of the human family. There was a war in heaven which resulted in the casting out of the apostate angels, or the devil and his angels. Celsus, the early anti-Christian who wrote about during the 2nd century AD, mocks Christians for their belief in the war in heaven and the fall of the angels and how they were cast under the earth and punished with chains. Celsus asked why God would need to fight with one of his own creations. Origen notes how Celsus had used the opinions of Marcion, who was believed to be by other critics or other Christians to be a heretic.
This is William Blank, his 1808 work on Satan's fall from heaven. This can be found in 500 Years of Art in Illustration, from Albrecht Dürer to Rockwell Kent, by Howard Simon. Published in 1949, Garden City Publishing Company, Garden City, New York. Going back to Origen and Celsus situation, a lot of these sources you've been hearing are in the Ante-Nicene Fathers series, volumes 1 through 4. Origen against Celsus is found in volume 4.
When Marcion says that two divine sons were locked in combat with one another, again hinting to the war in heaven. Celsus rejects Christ's pre-existence and descent from heaven, and he asks why Jesus, after he created the world and the universe, came to earth to work with wood as the woodworking man's son. And he asks why weren't a number of Christs sent down from heaven into every part of the earth instead of that one Spirit or Christ who came down into just one corner of the earth among the Jews.
This comes from Clunic Art of the Romanesque Period by Joan Evans, published by Cambridge at the University Press, 1950. Figure 121A, early 12th century work, showing again Michael the Archangel slaying the dragon.
Origen suggests that some people were born into good or bad conditions and circumstances as a consequences of their faithfulness or unfaithfulness in the pre-existence. In De Principiis, he considers whether or not their souls came into existence at the same time with their bodies or seemed to be anterior to them.
This comes from figure 76.10, as found in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, a catalog of Italian, Spanish, and Byzantine paintings by Harry B. Whehle, W-E-H-L-E, New York, 1940.
Christ's atonement had paid for the sins of the fallen angels, and if Satan and his demons were willing to repent, they would return someday to their heavenly home. Some aspects of the pre-existence are found in Jewish rabbinical literature in Palestine. About 260 are Samuel bar Naaman, and also about 300 are Asai, are Liu, and are Yashhat, all taught different aspects of the pre-existence, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing these names right, but I'm trying to point out here that during those time frames there were some Jews that mentioned the pre-existence in their Jewish rabbinical literature.
This here again is the war in heaven, where the demons are being thrust out of heaven. And again, we were considering earlier Origin plus following the timeline, chronological timeline. This is figure 12.192, and it's by an unknown Valencian painter, first quarter of the 15th century. This is Bruce R. McConkie, BYU Devotional.
Meaning that Christ adopted the Father's plan. He made it his own. He espoused it. He became the advocate of salvation, the leader in the cause of salvation, all because he was chosen to be born into the world as God's Son. All of this was known and taught and understood in the great eternities that went before. We all heard the gospel preached. We knew its terms and conditions. We knew what would be involved in this mortal probation. We knew that it was necessary to come here and get a mortal body as a step toward gaining an immortal body, one of flesh and bones. We knew that when we came here, we would need to be tried and examined and tested. We'd need to undergo probationary experiences when we were outside the presence of God, when we walked by faith rather than by sight.
This again depicts the war in heaven, Michael fighting with the dragon, of course. And then we will continue on. This is from Volume 1 of Who's Who in the Old Testament, together with the Apocrypha, by Joan Comey, published in 1980. Page 314. This is a 14th century work.
When the Spirit was housed in a tabernacle of clay and subject to the lusts and appetites and passions of mortality. This we all knew. And then our Father sent forth the great decree through the councils of eternity, whom shall I send to be my Son, to work out the infinite and eternal atoning sacrifice?
Being the legends, traditions, myths, symbols, customs, and superstitions of the Christian Church, by Frederick W.M. Hackwood, FRSL. This was published in 1902 in London, Elliott Stock, and it was republished by Gale Research Company, Book Tower, Detroit, 1969. This is on page 243. Continuing now with Bruce R. McConkie.
Mortality with the power of immortality, to inherit from me the power to work out the infinite and eternal atoning sacrifice. He got 2 volunteers. Christ the Lord said, Father, thy will be done. That is, I will go down and do what thou hast ordained and sacrifice myself. I will be the lamb slain from the foundation of the world. Lucifer wanted to modify the Father's plan so radically that we could almost say he offered a new system of salvation. He wanted to deny all men their agency, to save all men, and in return receive the power and dignity and glory of the Father. He wanted to take the place of the Father. The decision was then made, I will send the first. And the plan was put into operation. Part of it was the creation of this earth. Then came its peopling, and we are all the sons and daughters of Father Adam. All of us are eternal beings, offspring of deity. Our mortal bodies have been made from the dust of the earth. We're here having mortal bodies, being examined and tried and tested to see if we'll walk uprightly and keep the commandments.
Plate 25, going back to this chronology.
Other Christian writers, such as Lactantius, about 260 through 330 AD, says that Satan was the first angel created, and he became the chief of the bad angels. Lucifer caused a war in heaven because he was jealous of his spirit brother, Jesus Christ. Methodius, bishop of Patara in Lycia.
This comes from The Golden Age of Dutch Manuscript Painting by a number of writers. Belser Verlag, 1989 was the publishing date. See page 259, plate XII or 12, number 99.
Methodius, bishop of Patara in Lycia, rejects Origen's teachings on the preexistence. 323 through 325, Eusebius of Caesarea, or Eusebius, friend of the martyr Pamphilii, he says that Christ was the light which was before the world, the intellectual or essential wisdom which existed before the ages, the living word which was in the beginning with the Father and which was God.
This is in the Book of Art, A Pictorial Encyclopedia of Painting, Drawing, and Sculpture, Volume 1, Origins of Western Art, by a number of people. General introduction by Sir Herbert Reed. Text by Dr. Donald E. Strong. This was published by Gruyler Incorporated, 1965. See page 149. This dates back to 1250 AD, showing again the Christ child being passed on into the hands of an angel who is being passed on and ascending up into another realm of existence, away from the dragon.
Christ was also the first and only begotten of God, which was before every creature and creation, visible and invisible. The commander-in-chief of the rational and immortal host of heaven,
Eusebius.
the messenger of the great heavenly council, the executor of the Father's unspoken will, the creator with the Father of all things, the second cause of the universe after the Father.
This comes from Age of Chivalry, Art in Plantagenet, England, 1200 through 1400, edited by Jonathan Alexander and Paul Binsky. Royal Academy of Arts, London, 1987. Page 307, figure 257, dating back to 1205 through 1215 AD, showing again Michael fighting with the dragon.
328, Theodore of Mopsuestia died, and he was born in Antioch, bishop of Mopsuestia of Sicilia, I believe these ancient cities are pronounced. Christ's spirit was not born to Mary, but his body had been. Our earthly mothers were not the mothers of our pre-existing spirits. 331, Gregory of Nyssa was born. In 376, he believes that spirits were good and noble before coming to earth, but in the course of earth life, the soul becomes filthy because of sins.
This is from Great Art and Artist of the World, German and Spanish Art to 1900, edited by Dr. Horst Bay and others. Franklin Watts Incorporated, his publishers. A number of people are involved in this particular work. See page 140. This dates back to 1606 AD, of course, and it's a stone carving.
Through Christ and the ordinances or the mysteries, the soul is cleansed and restored to that goodness and greatness which the soul had known in the pre-existence or its first estate.
Gregory of Nyssa.
In 380, he fought against Origen's version of the doctrine of the pre-existence. Methodius influences Gregory to abandon the doctrine. Eventually, he even begins to fight against it. He notes how many Christians of his time were confused about the pre-existence. Some say we lived in families there and in tribes just as we do here, and that we lost our wings when we came down here and will get them back again upon earth.
This is from A History of Spanish Painting by Post, cited earlier. 1947 is when this was published, and also reprinted in 1970. Page 369 of Volume 9, Part 1, Figure 122. This dates back to about the 16th century. Michael slaying the devil.
345 through 420 is the time frame for Saint Jerome. Now, he accepts certain aspects of the stories about the pre-existence. The star, morning star, There was also a treasury in heaven of pre-existing souls. In 380, in the Discourse of Abington by Timothy, Archbishop of Alexandria, he mentions the council in heaven, the plan of God presented to the host of heaven. Pilastrius places the doctrine of preexistence amongst the heresies.
This is from Volume 10, page 145, figure 49.
354 through 430 was the time frame for St. Augustine, Bishop of Hippo in North Africa. He opposes the doctrine of a fall in a pre-existent state, and he rejects the belief that the type of body that a person was born into was a reflection of the degree of the seriousness of their premortal sins as spirits. 412. Cyril of Alexandria and Nemesius of Emesa defend the doctrine of the simple pre-existence of the soul, but not of its fall in a pre-existent state.
Page 272, figure 101.
512 through 519. Severus, Bishop of Antioch. He basically believes that Christ existed before all worlds. 536. Theodosius, Archbishop of Alexandria. Michael took away the devil's angelic powers, glory, rank, and cast him and his other demon followers out of heaven. 553. During the Fifth Ecumenical Council, the Second Council of Constantinople, Origen's views and interpretations were again attacked during the lifetime of the Emperor Justinian, who lived about 527 through 565, and wrote against Origen's interpretations of the pre-existence during the lifetime of St. Gregory, 540 through 604. There's a legend about Michael, the archangel, who lands on top of a building and unsheaths his bloody sword as though he had been in battle with evil forces somewhere nearby, thus hinting to the war in heaven traditions. The Old English Genesis consists of two poems in one which portion dates back to the 700s or the 7th century, and Genesis B, which is a late 10th century work from the 9th century Old Saxon poem.
This is from Paintings in the Louvre by Lawrence Gowie, 1987, Stewart, Tabary and Chain, New York. And this one here shows the council in heaven and Satan's fall from heaven.
Genesis A speaks of the fall of Satan, while in Genesis B, Satan is enraged at God and boasts of his own strength and rouses his followers to rebellion. They are cast down into the fires of hell. Christ laments over the fallen angels. During the 8th through the 10th centuries, artworks present different aspects of the story. Some of these are cosmic wars between Christ and the devil, the combat of saints and angels against demons, and Saint Michael, the archangel again, overcoming the dragon. A number of churches dedicated to Saint Michael, or Michael the archangel. Some works on Michael date back from the period of the Norman influence in England.
Page 76.
In other artworks, one in the year 1007, a woman is confronted by a seven-headed dragon. One dated 1020, a dragon is about to be thrust through with spears. Another one dated 1028 shows the war in heaven. One dated 1077 shows the war of the angels from the apocalypse of Vitus Saint Sever at Glasgow. 1140. At the very moment when a horned devil is about to claw at the Virgin and her baby, an angel of God extends down to take the child away to heaven.
This one here shows the war in heaven taking place behind the crucifixion scene off to the right, where you see a host of angels thrusting out the devil out of heaven. Bruegel by Walter S. Gibson, published by Thames and Hudson, 1977. This is an early 16th century work.
Another one dated 1159. Michael and his angels fight with the demonic forces of the dragon. Another one from 1250 through 1285. Artists depict during this time frame numerous bouts in heaven between the forces of God and the rebel angels and the dragon. In one dated 1260, the dragon's tail curls in some of the stars of heaven as it confronts a woman and her child.
Figures 67 and 68.
That's hitting to how the dragon caused some of the angels to fall from heaven, or the devil caused some of the spirits to fall from heaven, according to Revelation chapter 12 and the Book of Enoch and other sources. 1207 through 1210 and 1282, or also 1297, is the time frame for Mechtild of Magdeburg, and this person believed that Christ had pre-existed.
Essays in Northern Europe art, presented to Egbert Haverkamp Begeman on his 60th birthday. Published or printed by Davico. In
1265 through 1321, Dante Alighieri, I believe his name is pronounced, I'm sure I'm not getting that name right, but in his Divine Comedy, he presents the fallen angels. Dante, of course, is the name that I'm more familiar with, as well as many who might hear this tape. Anyways, he presents the idea of fallen angels in that Divine Comedy. Very famous work.
This comes from The Apocalypse, Visions from the Book of Revelation in Western Art by Frederick van der Meer, published in 1978. Mercator Fons, Antwerp. Published by Alpine Fine Arts Collection. Publishers of Fine Art Books, New York, New York. Again, this shows the father grasping the wrists of the Christ child to pull him into the heavenly temple.
Very famous work. In 1340, Michael's victory over the dragon is presented in artworks. In 1375, French tapestry shows a seven-headed dragon as it confronts a woman with a child. In 1410, the creation and the fallen angels are depicted. In 1411 through 1416, the council of angels meeting in heaven before the throne of God is depicted, and it's interesting, in this particular artwork, a number of chairs.
This is page 262. The one before that was a 12th century depiction.
A number of chairs have become vacant after some of the angels had fallen out of heaven. So what we have in this particular artwork is council in heaven, the angels that fell from heaven. And when they fall down to the earth, they don't just keep on, they don't stop when they hit the surface of the earth. They crash right down into the underworld. It seems to be suggested because there's angels plowing down, smashing through the surface of the earth and keep on going. It seems to be suggested in this artwork.
Keep in mind that this is, when you consider the artworks, it's not following now any chronological order, but the comments that follow after mentioning the sources is one of chronological order. This is page 322. Some of these artworks, like mentioning before, the Council in Heaven, the Fall of Angels, were artworks we considered earlier.
In 1420, in Little Paradise Garden, Michael and St. George vanquish a dragon. So here we have the legends about St. George being blended in, hinted to, together with the idea that Michael, the archangel, defeated the dragon, and in later customs about St. George, he is a type of Michael.
This is from Dragons and Dragon Lore by Ernst Igensol, and it was published in 1928 by Payson and Clark's, New York. This shows on page 133 a French stone sculpture of the 14th and 15th centuries, and one of them is of the dragon being slain by Michael the Archangel.
In 1427, there was a depiction of the combat angels fighting and casting the dragon out of heaven. And 1400s through 1430 through 1450, Michael is about to strike the dragon with his sword in another depiction.
Page 169, a Italian 15th century work of the battle between the devil and Michael the Archangel.
1420 through 1462, Michele G.M. Bono shows Michael as he slays the dragon. In 1455 through 1460, there's a depiction of the punishment of the rebellious angels. In 1475 through 1498, Michael is about to strike the dragon under his feet with his sword in another depiction.
This is in The Life of the Devil by Father Louis Coulain, translated from the French by Stephen Hayden Guest, published in 1929, London, Alfred A. Knopf. Showing again Michael slaying the dragon. 15th century work.
In 1498, a woodcut shows Michael and his angels as they fight in the air against the demonic forces of the devil. In 1493 through 1505, war rages in heaven behind the crucifixion scenes of Calvary.
You seen that one earlier.
And that is another artwork that shows that.
Page 17.
And that is another artwork that shows that. In 1483 through 1510, Raphael with Michael raised their swords up to slay the dragon. So they're in the process of slaying the dragon in this particular artwork that dates back to that.
This is from a Dictionary of Angels, including the Fallen Angels, by Gustav Davison, 1967. The Free Press, New York, Collier Macmillan Limited, London. Page 253.
1502, Michael slays the dragon again in another artwork. In 1525 is another depiction of the rebel angels and their fall from heaven. In 1505 through 1508, the Cathedral of Archangel Michael. This is a cathedral that was basically dedicated to Michael the Archangel.
This source here shows a number of depictions of the battle between Michael the Archangel, and so we'll just have you consider this source as by way of a bibliography.
It's an Italian architect, also by the name of Alivisio Novi, basically depicts Michael. 1540 through 1605. Numerous depictions and symbols of Michael's sword are seen.
This is from Early Italian Painting to 1400, Robert Ortill, 1966, Frederick A. Fraser Publishers, New York, Washington. And it shows on figure or page or plate 52 a depiction of the creation. Notice Adam and Eve are being sent down to the earth. They're passing through the mandorla symbol to enter into the physical world. Thus they were sent down from heaven, hinting again, of course, to the pre-existence.
In 1608 through 1674, Milton Hunter in his Paradise Lost presents the fallen angels. 1757 through 1827, William Blake presents the fall of Satan and his followers into hell. During the 1830s through 1840s, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints believed that the doctrine and stories about the pre-existence, as understood by the ancient church, They believe that it was lost during the Great Apostasy and again was revealed and restored by God through the prophet Joseph Smith.
This comes from The Bible in Art, 20 Centuries of Famous Bible Paintings, edited with commentary by Clifton Harvey, Garden City Publishers Company, Incorporated, Garden City, New York, 1936. See page 370. This is a 16th century depiction of the war in heaven.
In other words, we as Latter-day Saints believe and testify that Joseph Smith, as a prophet, restored these ancient stories and teachings as it was understood by the very earliest Christians. In 1880 through 1888, Ellen G. White suggests that the origins of evil go back to Satan's rebellion and war in heaven. Later, polemical anti-Christian writer and an anti-Christian work in this particular case is by T.W. Doney. He uses the same logic which Celsus had used earlier. He points out a number of parallels between Christianity and the pagan nations and then suggests that, quote, our assertion that that which is called Christianity is nothing more than the religion of paganism, we consider to have been fully verified. We have found among the heathen, centuries before the time of Christ Jesus, the belief in an incarnated God born of a virgin, his previous existence in heaven, and other similarities, he goes on to say. This is found in Bible Myths by Doney, page 384. Note, again, he mentions the preexistence, his previous existence in heaven.
This is on page 371 of the earlier work cited, The Bible in Art.
Doney knew of John P. Lundy's book and yet decided to not accept Lundy's answer as to why there could be parallels, for Lundy wrote that, quote, Infidelity has been accustomed to say from the time of Dupuis to the present that Christianity is only a sort of copy of ancient paganism, that it has no new ideas, and must therefore be rejected. But where did paganism get its sublime concepts of God, its notions of immortality and human destiny? Whence did all ancient nations derive them, hold them, and agree so marvelously about them? This universal faith must have been adequate cause, and Christianity is but the more full, clear, true, and glorious exponent of it all. If Christ was before Abraham, as he claimed to be, then surely he must have manifested himself to other nations besides the Jews, or other nations, including the Jews, must have derived their religious systems and ideas from some common source. End of quote. And that's from John P. Lundy, Monumental Christianity, page 98. Now, we will consider another area which has been legendized. The gospel preached to the spirits in prison, too. The descent was predicted and mentioned by many of the Old and New Testament writers. The earliest to later Christians, and as also This doctrine is found in many religious documents, poems, songs, legends, and traditions. It was depicted in numerous artworks on monuments, stone carvings, book designs, illumination manuscripts, and glass windows. It was also dramatized in numerous mystery plays and rituals and liturgies throughout Christian history. Christ's descent made it possible for the dead to be able to live again and to be set free from the bonds of death. For if they didn't have the chance during their mortal life to hear and obey the gospel, they would be given that opportunity in the afterlife realms. If, however, they did have the chance but were once disobedient and thus went to the spirit prison, and upon hearing it again and repenting and living according to God of the Spirit, they would eventually be released, resurrected, and guided over into paradise, having been redeemed from their sins. Artists had to decide which moments in the whole drama they wanted to depict. Thus, some artists showed the following moments: Christ kicking the doors of Hades. See the Anastasis by Carsonas, figure 19, and the whole book is real good. Or they depicted the doors as they began to fall, after which some depicted after the doors had fallen, and others would depict as Christ defeats and stands on the doors of hell with the demonic monstrous beings of the underworld underneath